as I mentioned, we have 2 tours going on at once at Rebel News. Sometimes we have joint events. Sheila Gunn-Reid was the host of the movie Church Under Fire, and Tamara Lich is the author of the #1 best-selling book, Hold the Line. What a pleasure to catch up with her now. Tamara, it's nice to see you again. Here in such a gorgeous setting, we're on tour for your book. How's it going?
It's been amazing. The support has been almost overwhelming. I never expected to see so many people coming out, but it's been unreal.
You know, I find that heartening because it's been more than a year, been about a year and a half. And you'd think, well, maybe people have forgotten, or maybe people have moved on, or maybe people were propagandized by the regime media. But no, like sold out crowd. Last night, you and I were in Surrey, packed. There was people in overflow rooms. There was upstairs. Like it was, they couldn't shoehorn any more people into the venue. To me, that's very exciting.
It's very encouraging, yes. I think with the evidence that came out at the POEC and the more evidence that comes...
That's a Trucker Commission of Inquiry.
Yes, sorry, thank you. I think more people are waking up and becoming more aware as to what's really going on.
I love to brag that your book went to #1 on the bestseller list the day it was released, even though we weren't even really ready for it yet. It just sort of popped up and we weren't ready, and it went to #1. The reason I mention that is that normally a book about the public interest, I mean, this was the #1 news story of the year, the trucker convoy and the reverberations from it, and Trudeau invoking the Emergencies Act. That was the story of the generation. And you were in the heart of it. Whether people love you or hate you, you have a story to tell. I still can't believe that the CBC, Globe and Mail, Toronto Star, even the National Post have not even mentioned your book, even to criticize it. Like they have book sections. Why won't they talk about your book, even to disparage it?
Well, I don't think they want to bring any attention to it, primarily speaking. If they talk about it, they have to acknowledge the existence not only of me and my book, but of also the Freedom Convoy in general.
The counter-narrative. I mean, our motto at Rebel News is telling the other side of the story. And I think that's really why the pandemic and the lockdowns and the convoy was our time to shine. People don't necessarily look for the contrarian take all the time on anything. But during that era of fake uniformity, of fake unanimity, people said, no, there's got to be another side. I think there's still sort of a blacklisting of any sources that counter the regime narrative. And I don't think that's paranoia on my part. I think it's just an observation.
I think it's obvious, actually. I mean, I'm not on social media anymore, obviously, till my conditions are gone, but you won't see that in the mainstream media. They won't talk about it.
Your trial is coming up, and I want to be very careful not to get you to weigh in because I don't want you to prejudice your case. And obviously we don't want to violate your bail conditions. We were careful with your book. Your book was lawyered in advance. Not that there was anything wrong with it, but we just didn't want to take the chance because the government, I think they have a vendetta against you. And again, we'll never be able to know all their motivations, but I think the government didn't like the fact that you challenged their narrative, and they didn't, if I may, they didn't like you personally because you broke their caricature. Their caricature of the trucker convoy was angry, male, shouting, maybe a little verbally abusive. You are, I like to say, a 5'0" Métis grandma from Alberta who answers hate with love. In fact, you turn the other cheek more than I ever could. I think that's why they had to go after you, is because they said, we can't let Tamara Lich be the foil for Justin Trudeau. And they wanted to punish you because you were effective. That's my personal theory. You can call that paranoia, but I don't think so. I think it's just they wanted to take you out of the public conversation.
I think you're right. And I think what really scared them the most was the unity that happened across Canada. It was very obvious, and still is to me, that they were dividing people by every label they could think of for the last few years. And I think that's what really scared them the most, was seeing Canadians just drop those labels and just be so proud to be Canadian.
I want to ask you a personal question. I have never been to prison as a prisoner. I've visited people in prison, and I can sense how stressful it is, how it makes you feel completely helpless. That was the chief feeling I had when I would sometimes visit people in prison. You were treated roughly, in my view. You were put in isolation. You were arrested and jailed for ridiculous reasons that judges later said, but still 49 days. I just want to ask you, how did you keep your sanity when all around you were losing theirs? It's like that poem by Kipling, If, to keep your wits while all those around. Where did you reach into? Was it religion? Was it family? Was it a code, like a personal philosophical code? I don't know if I could have held out and been as positive as you are. I think I might have cracked. I think I might have turned bitter or sour. Can you tell me where you went in your heart or your mind to survive what I think was an abusive detention?
That's a great question. I often talk about how, for me, a lot of this has been like a divine journey, a divine adventure. And I just recognized the things that were inadvertently exposed, byproducts of the convoy, like the mainstream media, the banking systems, the corruption at corporations like GoFundMe, government, all levels of government. And I just felt like that was a divine, and so when I got arrested, I just felt like, okay, you have more work for me to do. And I prayed a lot. My mantra was thy will, not my will.
You Christian?
Yeah, I was raised Christian. I also have my native spirituality, and yes, and I've done energy healing and stuff like that. So I have a really nice hybrid of beliefs that really work for me, a kind of a combination of all of them. And at the core of all of them is love. And I truly believe that that's how we win.
In your book, and I heard you tell this story the other day, that some police officers, some prison guards, were actually supportive of you. And they said that. It must be hard. I mean, for those, that would have felt like a secret friend. But I think you were kind even to the cops who were not nice, even to the cops who were abusive. I don't want to overstate their abuse, but they were cruel. How should anyone, how do you meet hate with love? Like, how do you do that? Don't people take advantage of you when you do that? If you meet, and Henry Hildebrandt was the same way. He's the pastor in Aylmer who talked about loving and praying for the officers who shut him down. Where do you come up with that? Like I know that's what you're supposed to do. I know turn the other cheek, that's Jesus would say that. But it's easy to read that, but how do you do that?
Well, fundamentally for me, it just comes down to being respectful. I mean,
when you're being disrespected, how do you fight disrespect with respect?
Well, then I guess because it's not taking up space in my head. And that's what's important for me, is to stay focused and stay positive. Of course, there's been, lots of terrible things written about me, and I've been called horrible, horrible names. And when we were coming across Canada, I remember a friend of mine kept sending me these articles, these terrible articles, when they were calling me horrible names and tweets and hate tweets and stuff like that. And I just had to say to her one day, please stop.
Yeah.
I'm not going to read them. I need to stay focused and I need to stay positive, and this is not going to help my mental health. And so I just have to let that stuff fall away. And if there's one thing I've learned out of this whole thing, is that I've developed very thick skin. So, to me, it just comes down to being respectful. And even if they're not going to respect me in return, I can say that I've done my best.